For years, I genuinely believed that if you worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, sacrificed enough, eventually people would value you. I believed effort always gets noticed. I believed dedication creates security. I believed that if you became indispensable, people would naturally respect you. And honestly, that belief shaped my entire adult life. For more than 5 years, I gave almost everything I had to one workplace. Not just my time, not just my skills. I gave them my nervous system, my peace, my energy, my evenings, my sleep, my mental health. I gave them the version of myself that always said yes. Yes to staying late. Yes to impossible deadlines. Yes to fixing emergencies. Yes to carrying responsibilities that were never officially mine. And at first, I didn't even see it as sacrifice. I thought this was what strong people did. I thought this was professionalism. I thought this was ambition. I thought exhaustion was proof that I mattered. There were nights when I went to sleep at 3 or 4 in the morning because I was still finishing documents, preparing files, solving urgent issues, trying to make everything work. And the strange thing about burnout is that it rarely feels dramatic in the beginning. It happens slowly. You don't wake up one morning destroyed. You slowly adapt to stress. You slowly normalize anxiety. You slowly accept exhaustion as your personality. And one day, you realize your entire life revolves around surviving work. That was me. Even during difficult periods inside the company, instability, pressure, internal conflict, I stayed loyal. I helped organize and transport confidential documentation myself. I carried responsibilities far beyond my position. I handled situations that required trust, precision, emotional control, and professionalism. And I did it willingly. Not because someone forced me, but because I genuinely cared. That's what hurts the most when you finally break. Not that you worked hard, but that you cared deeply in a place that slowly stopped seeing you as human. I almost never asked for anything. For years, my salary barely changed. I kept telling myself, later. They'll notice eventually. This is temporary. They appreciate me, even if they don't say it. And when I finally gathered the courage to ask for a salary increase after years of sacrifice, something inside me changed forever. Because it wasn't just the answer. It was what the answer revealed. I realized I was not being seen as someone valuable. I was being seen as someone reliable enough to keep overworking without demanding more. There's a painful difference between being appreciated and being useful. Useful people are often kept exhausted on purpose, because exhausted people stop asking questions. Exhausted people stop negotiating. Exhausted people become grateful for crumbs. And I think many people watching this video know exactly what I mean. Maybe you also became the dependable one. The one who fixes problems. The one who stays calm. The one who carries everyone else's stress. The one who keeps things functioning quietly behind the scenes. And because you do it well, people slowly stop seeing it as extraordinary. Your sacrifice becomes expected. That's one of the most dangerous psychological traps in toxic workplaces. The better you perform under pressure, the more pressure becomes your identity. Nobody asks if you're okay anymore. They just expect you to continue. What finally broke me wasn't one catastrophic event. It was accumulation. Years of emotional erosion. And then one day, after a conversation that felt deeply disrespectful, something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Quietly. It was almost like waking up from hypnosis. I remember suddenly thinking, I am an adult woman. Why am I allowing myself to be spoken to like this? That moment was terrifying. Because once you truly see the disrespect clearly, you cannot unsee it anymore. And the hardest part was realizing how long I had abandoned myself trying to earn basic recognition. That realization hurt more than the job itself. I had confused loyalty with self-worth. I thought enduring more made me more valuable. But suffering is not proof of value. Overworking is not proof of importance. And constantly sacrificing yourself for people who would never do the same for you is not strength. Sometimes it is fear. Fear of instability. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of starting over. Fear of discovering that maybe nobody will value you anywhere. So you stay. You tolerate more. You shrink more. You silence yourself more. Until eventually you don't even recognize yourself anymore. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Toxic work environments don't always destroy your confidence aggressively. Sometimes they do it quietly. They slowly disconnect you from your own instincts. You stop trusting your feelings. You stop believing your exhaustion matters. You stop believing you deserve rest. You stop believing your contribution has value unless someone else confirms it. And eventually you become emotionally dependent on external validation from people who benefit from keeping you uncertain. That realization changed my life. Because once I saw it clearly, I knew I could never go back psychologically. Even if the salary improved later. Even if they suddenly became nicer. Even if things temporarily calmed down. Something fundamental had broken. Trust. Not just trust in them. Trust in the version of myself that tolerated all of this for so long. And leaving was not easy. I didn't leave dramatically. I didn't scream. I didn't burn bridges publicly. I left politely, professionally, quietly. But internally, I was grieving. Not only the loss of a job. I was grieving the years I spent believing that survival was the same thing as success. I was grieving the version of myself that thought being needed was the same thing as being respected. And honestly, one of the strangest feelings after leaving was silence. No urgent calls, no panic, no deadlines, no constant emotional tension. At first, silence felt uncomfortable. Because when you've lived in stress for years, peace almost feels suspicious. Your body keeps waiting for the next emergency. That's something many burned-out people experience. Even after escaping the environment, your nervous system still lives there for a while. And now I understand something I wish someone had told me years ago. A workplace can financially employ you while psychologically consuming you. And if you stay long enough in environments where your humanity is secondary to your productivity, eventually you begin measuring your worth only through usefulness. That is an incredibly dangerous way to live. Because the moment you stop producing, you feel guilty for existing. I never want to live like that again. And this experience changed the way I see work forever. I can collaborate with people. I can build with people. I can create partnerships. But I never again want to hand another person complete emotional control over my dignity, my time, and my self-worth. Never again. One of the hardest things about experiences like this is realizing that burnout rarely begins with weakness. It usually begins with good qualities: responsibility, empathy, loyalty, discipline, work ethic, the desire to prove yourself, the desire to help, the desire to be useful. The problem is that toxic environments know how to survive on people like that. Not because they are evil masterminds, but because workplaces naturally continue taking from people who continue giving without limits. And one of the biggest lessons this experience taught me is this: if you never learn to protect your boundaries, your dedication will eventually be used against you. That sentence changed the way I see everything. Because for years, I believed boundaries were selfish. I thought saying no meant being difficult. I thought asking for recognition meant being ungrateful. I thought constantly sacrificing myself made me admirable. But healthy environments do not require self-destruction in exchange for belonging. That is not professionalism. That is emotional conditioning. And I think many people watching this video are stuck in the exact same psychological cycle without fully realizing it. You start by wanting to do a good job. Then you become the reliable one. Then everyone depends on you. Then your workload quietly becomes abnormal. Then your stress becomes invisible because people are used to you handling it. And eventually, your suffering becomes normalized, even by yourself. That is the dangerous part. Not when others stop valuing you, When you stop valuing yourself enough to notice something is deeply wrong. Another lesson this experience taught me is that many people confuse being needed with being respected. Those are not the same thing. A company may desperately need your labor while emotionally undervaluing you completely. You can be essential to the operation and still be emotionally disposable in the eyes of management. That realization is painful because many hardworking people build their identity around being useful. I did too. I thought, if they trust me with important things, that must mean they value me. Not necessarily. Sometimes people trust you with responsibility because they know you will carry it quietly without creating conflict. And if you are someone with a strong sense of responsibility, you become extremely vulnerable to exploitation disguised as appreciation. That is why one of the most important things I want viewers to understand is this. Never let your entire self-worth depend on how useful you are to other people. Because usefulness has no natural limit. If you do not create limits yourself, some environments will consume every ounce of energy you have and still ask for more. Another painful lesson I learned is that burnout changes your personality slowly. You become emotionally numb. You lose curiosity. You lose creativity. You lose spontaneity. You stop enjoying your own life. And because the change happens gradually, you don't even realize how disconnected from yourself you have become. I used to think I was simply tired. But deep exhaustion changes the way you think about yourself. You become smaller psychologically. You start doubting your abilities. You stop negotiating. You stop dreaming bigger. You become afraid of instability because your nervous system is already overloaded. And that fear traps many intelligent people in environments that are destroying them. That is another lesson I desperately want people to understand. Fear can make toxic situations look safer than freedom, even when your soul is screaming to leave. And something else I learned. People often wait too long to leave because they are waiting for undeniable proof that they are being mistreated. But emotional exhaustion itself is already information. Constant anxiety is information. Dreading work every morning is information. Feeling emotionally smaller around certain people is information. Feeling guilty for asking for basic respect is information. Your body notices what your mind tries to rationalize. And for years, I rationalized everything. They're stressed. It's temporary. They don't mean it personally. I just need to work harder. I'm lucky to even have this job. That inner dialogue kept me trapped much longer than I should have stayed. And I know many viewers are doing the same thing right now, especially high-functioning people. Especially people raised to overachieve. Especially people who learned early in life that love, approval, or safety had to be earned through performance. Those people often become incredible workers and deeply vulnerable employees because they unconsciously associate self-sacrifice with worthiness. That realization was life-changing for me. Another important lesson: if someone only values you when you are overextending yourself, they do not value the real you. They value your exhaustion. Healthy professional relationships should not require emotional self-erasure. You should not have to become chronically stressed in order to feel secure. And one thing I deeply regret is how long I ignored my intuition. There were moments, many moments, where my body already knew I was unhappy long before my mind admitted it. But I kept overriding myself. Because responsible people are often praised for tolerating things that are psychologically unhealthy. That is something society rewards too much. People admire endurance without asking what it is costing you internally. And yes, resilience matters. Discipline matters. Hard work matters. But not at the cost of your identity. Not at the cost of your nervous system. Not at the cost of becoming emotionally disconnected from yourself. Another lesson this experience taught me is that financial dependence can silence people psychologically. When your survival depends on an environment, it becomes much harder to evaluate that environment honestly. You minimize problems. You tolerate disrespect. You postpone difficult decisions. That's why building some form of independence, emotionally, professionally, financially, matters so much. Even small independence creates psychological freedom. And if I could give practical advice to anyone watching this who wants to avoid ending up in the same situation, I would say this. Pay attention to patterns, not isolated moments. Anyone can have a bad day. Anyone can become stressed. But repeated disrespect is a pattern. Repeated dismissal is a pattern. Repeated emotional exhaustion is a pattern. Believe patterns. Another thing, document your growth objectively. Do not wait for workplaces to define your value for you. Keep track of your skills, your responsibilities, your achievements, the problems you solve, the things you carry that others avoid. Because many hardworking people become psychologically dependent on external validation and slowly forget how much they actually contribute. And perhaps the biggest lesson of all, never build your entire identity around being indispensable to a place that would replace you tomorrow if necessary. That sounds harsh. But understanding this creates healthier boundaries. Your life is bigger than your productivity. Your worth is bigger than your job title. And no professional environment deserves unlimited access to your mental health, dignity, or identity. I also learned that leaving does not automatically heal you. Sometimes after leaving, you still carry the emotional habits the environment created inside you. You still feel guilty resting. You still feel anxious when not working. You still feel like you constantly need to prove yourself. Healing from burnout is not only about leaving the environment. It is about rebuilding your relationship with yourself, learning to rest without guilt, learning to trust your instincts again, learning that your value is not measured exclusively by output. That process takes time, and honestly, I think I am still learning it. But one thing is certain. I will never again abandon myself in order to be accepted professionally. Never again. Because no amount of loyalty is worth losing your self-respect. And if this video resonates with you, please understand. You are not weak for being exhausted. Many strong people stay too long in environments that slowly break them because they are trying to prove their value through endurance. But your life should not become a permanent performance of suffering just to earn basic appreciation. You deserve environments where respect is not conditional on self-destruction. And sometimes the most important career decision you will ever make is finally choosing yourself before there is nothing left of you to save. Leaving terrified me. I had no perfect plan, no financial safety net, no certainty. But deep down, I knew something very clearly. If I stayed longer, eventually I would lose parts of myself that would be much harder to rebuild than money. And no career is worth that price, not one. Some people will never understand why you walked away, because they only see the salary, the stability, the title, the routine. They do not see the silent psychological cost of surviving in an environment where your spirit is slowly collapsing. But you feel it. Your body feels it. Your mind feels it. Your soul feels it. And eventually there comes a moment where continuing becomes more painful than leaving. That was my moment. And despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the grief, I think walking away may have been the first truly honest thing I've done for myself in years. Because for the first time in a very long time, I chose my own dignity over being useful to people who had stopped seeing my humanity. And that decision changed me forever. If something similar happened to you, please subscribe, share, and comment. Yours humbly, Just an Eldest